So there's been lots of talk about a live-action Spider-Verse movie recently featuring a crossover between the Raimi Spider-Man, the Webb Spider-Man, and the Watts Spider-Man. Or, as most people call them, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and the Tom Holland Spider-Man. So I thought I'd give my own pitch for what this would look like. I'm just gonna say sorry about the lack of editing on this video, but I upload daily, so editing a 20-minute video while also juggling other videos, side projects, and midterms isn't really viable. Anyway, so first a few things you should know. 1. This is Spider-Man 4, not Spider-Man 3. I've talked about this before. I don't think it's realistic for them to do Spider-Verse in Spider-Man 3. So Spider-Man 4 it is. 2. There are some prerequisites, i.e. things that need to happen in Spider-Man 3 for this to work. Nothing major though. Peter is now working at the Daily Bugle, which I think is pretty likely to happen since he's probably going to graduate from high school in Spider-Man 3. His name has been cleared and nobody knows that Peter is Spider-Man, and this is optional, but ideally Oscorp has been set up to some extent. I think if Electro is the villain of Spider-Man 3, it shouldn't be that hard to at least bring Oscorp up, and maybe also introduce Harry Osborn, who'll be a character in this movie, as the son of Norman Osborn, who's inherited Oscorp after his dad passed away, but it's not required. And number 3, sorry guys, but I don't think Tobey Maguire would ever come back as Spider-Man, so to be realistic, this will just be Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, but I will have a nod to the Sam Raimi movies in this, so stay tuned for that if you're a Raimi fanatic. So, now for the movie. We open at J. Jonah Jameson's office. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is yelling about 10 different things and starts yelling for Parker to get in his office. We hear, "Yes, Mr. Jameson," but it's not Tom Holland's voice, it's Andrew Garfield's. I like this opening because it reintroduces the Amazing Spider-Verse by using the fact that J.K. Simmons plays two versions of the same character to imply that J.K. Simmons being J. Jonah Jameson is a multiversal constant. Anyway, the next 10 minutes of the movie is just kind of seeing what Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker has been up to. Right out of high school, he decided to take up photography as a profession and work at the Daily Bugle. He still fights crime as Spider-Man, though there hasn't been anything huge in a while. After mourning the loss of Gwen Stacy, he met and fell in love with Mary Jane Watson, played by Shailene Woodley, who played Mary Jane in some deleted Amazing Spider-Man 2 scenes and was supposed to reprise the role in The Amazing Spider-Man 3. And they're engaged now. He's been noticing some sketchy stuff has been going on at Oscorp though. Oscorp at this point is in a state of disrepair, clearly not what it once was. Something obviously went down at Oscorp a while ago. So Peter catches a criminal on the street and asks him what he knows about what Oscorp is doing. He doesn't know much, just that he's been told not to go near that place at night, and that when he is nearby he hears machinery. Peter runs some tests in his home laboratory and notices some strange particles emanating from Oscorp. PIM particles. Peter confronts Harry Osborn at Oscorp the next night to see that he has in fact been building, with the help of his remaining staff, a gateway into the quantum realm. Harry's scientists found disturbances in the thread of the universe itself about a year prior due to events in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And since then they've been looking into it and discovered the multiverse and the quantum realm. The quantum realm can allow them to bend and control reality itself, to control time and to move through dimensions. Peter tells Harry that this is too big for him to control. What's he gonna do with it? Bring back the Sinister Six and try again? Then the machine starts up and the portal opens. Peter shoots a web near the console to try and stop it, and we freeze there. The camera moves through the portal and out onto the other side, where we see pretty much the same place, but Oscorp is pretty different, and there's a different Spider-Man and Harry Osborn. We're in the MCU now. Then we rewind to earlier that day and see a shorter but very similar sequence with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. We see Tom Holland's Spider-Man work at the Daily Bugle, meeting up with MJ, finding out something suspicious is happening at Oscorp, and going there to see Harry Osborn activate the gateway. Both Spideys use their web to deactivate the gateway and take Harry to custody. That's Act 1. For the first half of Act 2, we go back and forth between both worlds that have two different but related storylines. So in the Amazing Spider-Man universe, Peter stays late at the Daily Bugle the next day and finds the Venom symbiote. We see Peter being affected in the way you'd kind of expect from the Venom symbiote. Something I really like from the Ultimate Comics that I think would work great and resolve something that we never got resolved in the Amazing Spider-Man movies would be Peter out and about with the new suit before encountering Uncle Ben's killer. Peter is shocked because he's been looking for this guy on and off for years and has finally found him. But then he gets so angry. Angry enough his body grows into Venom for a moment before Peter snaps out of it and gets back to normal, and just hands the guy off to police. Eventually he's snapped out of it completely by Mary Jane. He goes to Dr. Connors in prison and asks him about it. Connors tells Peter that while he worked at Oscorp, he heard rumors of a symbiote like this that Oscorp was working on, and warns him about the destructive properties it has. Peter goes to the now abandoned Oscorp building and searches through their records before finding something matching the symbiote labeled Project Venom. But it was apparently destroyed by Oscorp during trials for being too dangerous even to use as a weapon. So Peter wonders where it could have come from if Oscorp didn't create it. Peter runs some tests on it and finds out it's of extraterrestrial origin. Over in the MCU, the next morning when Peter's at the Daily Bugle, he hears J. Jonah Jameson screaming his head off, like more than usual. He goes over to see what the fuss is about and sees Jameson yelling at one Eddie Brock. Yes, Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. Eddie is screamed out by the Bugle before he has a chance to actually speak with Jameson. Peter only able to hear Jameson yelling at him to never come back again. Peter catches Eddie as he's leaving and asks what's going on. Eddie says that he used to work at the Bugle, but after trying to out Oscorp as an evil corporation, he was fired by Jameson, blacklisted, and forced to move to Los Angeles because the Bugle is funded by Oscorp. This is something that maybe Peter can relate to because maybe he tried something similar in Spider-Man 3. Peter asks Eddie what he needs from Jameson, and Eddie just says that he was hoping that since the Daily Bugle publishes all of their Spider-Man articles, that maybe they could contact Spider-Man and set up a meeting between them. Eddie won't go into detail, he just says that it's important. Peter says he'll see what he can do and meets Eddie that night as Spider-Man. Eddie is able to figure out pretty quickly that Peter is Spider-Man, and so they just talk. Eddie explains that a couple years prior he encountered a symbiote from another planet called a Venom. They work together as sort of a vigilante, and he proves this using newspaper articles and such from Los Angeles. One morning he woke up and Venom was gone. They had been in somewhat of a fight the day before over the morality of killing people while being a vigilante, and Eddie thinks that Venom came to New York City because he doesn't know much about Earth, but from Eddie's memory he knows about New York, and so he may have come here. And as they bonded and become closer and closer, Eddie and Venom had become codependent on each other. So the longer it takes to find Venom, the closer Eddie comes to dying. So Peter looks into the Daily Bugle's recent reports to see if they have any information on an alien visitor. He comes up with an incident from the week before of a man attacking a group of guards outside Oscorp and bursting his way in. The guards told police that he seemed possessed and had strange abilities that matched Venom's. The man hadn't had any kind of trouble with the law before, and his mutilated body was found in a dumpster the next morning. They need to go to the last place that they know Venom was at, Oscorp. Back in the Amazing Spider-Man universe, Peter contains Venom and breaks Harry Osborn out of Rikers. He takes Harry to Oscorp and demands that he reactivate the gateway in the same way as before so that he can get rid of Venom. Harry does to the best of his memory what his staff did, but as Peter throws Venom into the portal, Harry pushes Peter in and jumps through himself. Back in the MCU, Eddie and Peter arrive at Oscorp and look around. In the lab and near the Quantum Gateway, Eddie finds a containment unit like the one the Life Foundation used to contain Venom, but it's broken. Suddenly, the gateway reactivates. Eddie and Peter are confused after determining that neither one of them activated it. Then through the portal comes Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. This kicks off the second half of Act 2. So Peter are confused at first before determining what's going on, that they're the same person from two different universes. Then Garfield explains what's been going on. They realize that neither Venom nor Harry Osborn came through the portal. Both Peters realize at the same time that they must have split off down a different dimensional tunnel and are in another dimension. They have that moment of, oh crap, we just said the same thing about the same thing at the same time because we're the same person thing that's, not gonna lie, kind of cliche, but whatever. They figure that since the Harrys from both of their universes were trying to open the gateway at the same time, that it was probably inspired by the same reason. Andrew's Peter mentions that he thinks they're trying to bring back the Sinister Six, but Tom has no idea what the Sinister Six is, so they figure that if they have the same reason, it has to be something else. And that if they could use the Harry Osborn of the MCU and figure out why he used the gateway, they could determine where the other Harry went. All three of them come to the realization that they have to break Harry Osborn out of Riker's prison. The issue being that in The Amazing Spider-Man, Riker's is in bad shape from a ton of shit going on down there over the past however many years, but in the MCU it's in tip-top shape and nearly impossible to break into. But right before they go, Eddie collapses onto the ground. Time is starting to run out for him. They keep him in Tom Peters' apartment to keep him hydrated and fed to try and keep him healthy. Tom Peter meets with Nick Fury and kind of goes, "Hey man, I know it's legal, but for the sake of the multiverse, can you tell me how to break into Rikers?" And eventually Nick gives Peter all he needs to know. Meanwhile, Andrew Peter and Eddie are talking and Peter brings up that he should be careful with Venom once he gets it back, because on his Earth Venom was destroyed by Oscorp because it was too dangerous for even Oscorp to handle. Eddie doesn't really say anything in response, but we know that he's been minorly affected by this. We go over to Rikers where we sort of see Harry living it up for a minute or two, having a pretty good time. Meanwhile, both Spideys are staking the place out, getting ready to strike. Tom asks if it really would be possible to bring back whatever the Sinister Six are using the alternate dimensions. Andrew says that it is, and that you could theoretically bring anyone back by plucking them out of an alternate universe where they still exist. They look at each other and realize they're both thinking about the same thing. Andrew says that it's not worth thinking about bringing back Uncle Ben. I think it's kind of likely that we maybe find out about MCU Uncle Ben in Spider-Man 3, so hopefully this has some more context. They have a heart-to-heart about how much they miss Uncle Ben, with Tom learning a little more about coping with it from this alternate version of him that's had to live with it for longer. Then both Spider-Men break Harry out and hold him as a semi-hostage. They tell Harry that since he knows why the other Harry activated the machine and where he may have gone, he needs to help them. Harry initially refuses, but Andrew Peter talks to him and tells him that he's younger than the other Harry, less corrupted. He's a good kid, and he can help fix this. So Harry says that he has an idea, but that when he activated the machine for the first time, it wasn't fully developed. They didn't really have control or even really an understanding of controlling where it went. It was still under test phases and he doesn't know how to make it go to a certain universe like his counterpart apparently does. So they figure the technology they need in order to do that must be in the Amazing Spider-Man universe and fire up the gateway the same way they did before in order to go back there. While there, not only do they get the tech, but Tom Peter meets Mary Jane, and kinda gets freaked out for a second when Andrew Peter calls her MJ and says that she is his wife. Tom Peter goes, "You're married?" And Andrew just looks confused and says, "Well, technically not yet." Anyway, they get back to the MCU where Harry starts setting up the quantum gateway. Andrew Peter goes back to Tom Peter's house to make sure Eddie's okay, and to bring him to Oscorp so they can get Venom to him as quickly as possible. While there, he sees Tom Peter's phone ring and caller ID saying that it's MJ calling. Peter, out of sheer curiosity, picks up the phone. Then we get an awkward conversation of Peter not explaining who he is to MJ and MJ just kind of being confused as to what's going on and who this guy is. Back at Oscorp, Harry is working on the gateway and Tom Peter is helping him out. Peter asks Harry why he wanted to use the gateway, and Harry just says that he wants his dad back and that he would do anything just to talk to his dad one more time. So he was going to pluck him from another dimension. Just then, he finishes setting up the gateway. Andrew Peter and Eddie get there and they start activating it. Andrew Peter asks Harry how he knew where to set it to go. Harry just said that he set it to the nearest universe and figures his counterpart probably did the same. Fair enough. They open the gateway and immediately we see the Willem Dafoe Green Goblin suit and Goblin Glider fly through. He takes off his helmet and it's the Dane DeHaan Harry Osborn. After a brief fight between him and the two Spideys, he throws a jack-o'-lantern grenade onto the ground, filling the room with smoke. When it clears, both Harrys and the gateway are gone. That's the end of Act 2. Now, Act 3. So Amazing Spider Harry takes MCU Harry and the gateway to the original Oscorp building. Yeah, so more recently in the MCU, Norman Osborn bought what used to be the Avengers Tower and made it into the new Oscorp HQ not long before he died. But the original Oscorp, one pretty similar to the one in Amazing Spider-Verse, is still there, but now it's abandoned. Dane Harry tells MCU Harry that together they can use the gateway to bring back their dad. And then when they did, they'd bring back the Sinister Six as well. MCU Harry asks him what the Sinister Six is. Dane Harry scoffs at how different this world is from his and explains that in his world, he assembled a team of villains designed to kill Spider-Man as vengeance for the death of his father. Spider-Man beat them, but he would bring them back. MCU Harry asks what would be different this time? How would they win? Harry says that he's figured out a secret weapon, but we cut away before he can finish. Over at the newer Oscorp building, Eddie and the Peters, which is coincidentally also the name of a Christian rock group I'm producing, is coming up with a game plan when Eddie collapses on the ground in pain. They need to find the gateway ASAP. They use the Oscorp equipment to find the Harrys by scanning for pin particles that the gateway has been emitting. So they get there and start battling Harry in the goblin armor when suddenly the gateway opens and out comes another Spider-Man, who grabs Harry with the web and throws him through a wall. This Spider-Man lands in front of Eddie. Eddie asks, "Who are you?" "You know who I am." "I do?" "I'm your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." He takes off his mask and it's Tobey Maguire. "Yeah, I got you guys. How can I do Spider-Verse without Tobey? Come on." So, Harry comes back in and grabs Eddie. He says that if they don't leave, Eddie dies. So they back off and all leave. Back at Tom Peters' place, Tobey gives Eddie the Venom symbiote, saying that Venom tried to bond with him, but he's dealt with Venom many times before on his planet, and he was able to fight him off and contain him. Eddie gets Venom back and becomes rejuvenated, but he notices that something in Venom has changed. Now there's a new symbol on the chest. The Spider-Man symbol, and now he can stick to walls and shoot webs from his wrist. Tobey Peters says that in his reality, after Venom tried bonding with him, Venom was able to replicate some of his powers for the next host. This whole time, Tobey Peters is being pretty standoffish to Eddie. Anyway, the scanners have been off the charts over the past hour, finding pin particles, so clearly their plan is about to commence. But what is their plan? They start putting it together. Harry of the MCU said that he wanted the gateway to bring back his father. But the Harry of the Amazing Spider-Verse has gone over the edge. He's crazy. He tried going universe by universe, but that wasn't giving him the results he wanted. When he went there, his dad was dead there too. But the quantum realm can be used for more than just transportation between universes. It can control reality itself. With the right amount of control, Harry could make his dad a multiversal constant, something that unquestionably exists across all universes. He'd get his dad back, but Dane Harry isn't sane enough to stop there. He started this journey to madness out of hatred and revenge for Spider-Man. He's not just bringing back his dad, he's bringing back the Sinister Six and making them a universal constant as well. But they do the math and realize that that would put an immense amount of stress on the quantum realm, and there's a chance that the quantum realm could fold in on itself, eradicating the entire multiverse in the process. They have to stop him. Their plan is to have Eddie and Andrew Peter go in on one front, and for Tom Peter and Tobey Peter to sneak around the back and shut down the machine while Amazing Spider Harry is busy. While Eddie and Andrew Peter are fighting Harry, Tobey Peter and Tom Peter are talking about why Tobey Peter has been so cold to Eddie. Tobey Peter mentions that he's interacted with a different version of Venom on his Earth multiple times, and that it is dangerous. It makes the host think that they need it to survive, and slowly over time makes that true. Then it slowly starts to take control of the host, and eventually there's nothing left of the host, and Venom does what it wants. And in his world, Eddie Brock was enveloped by Venom and died at his hands, and that he doesn't want the same for this Earth's Eddie. But right now they have to focus on, saving the multiverse. So they get in there while Harry is fighting the others, but before they can shut off the gateway, MCU Harry clocks them from behind, just saying, "I'm sorry." They wake up and all four of our heroes are tied up as the Harrys are activating the gateway, creating a tunnel to essentially the epicenter of the quantum realm, a place that is essentially the control room of reality, a place that one can only survive with heavy armor like that of the Green Goblin armor, or else the radiation would atomize them. Tom Peter asks MCU Harry how he could do this, that he's better than this. MCU Harry just says that he's full of surprises. Just then, as Dane Harry is talking about how in just a few moments reality itself will be his to control, MCU Harry throws a pumpkin bomb at him and unlocks the electric locks holding Venom and the Spideys, which coincidentally is the name of another band I'm producing. Then we get an all-out brawl of the century. Green Goblin versus Spider-Man, 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 and Venom. It ends with the hero smashing his Goblin glider and yanking off his helmet. Andrew Spider-Man tells him that he's fallen so far from the friend that he grew up with. And the friend that I grew up with, chimes in Toby Peter. And the friend I met a year ago, chimes in Tom Peter. And some dude I just met today, says Eddie. They plan on just powering down the machine and sending him to authorities, but MCU Harry has other plans and throws him into the quantum realm with his helmet off. We see him get atomized, and then we flash to Central Park as Harry remembers it from his childhood. Harry is sitting on a bench when his father walks up to him. They have a conversation in which Harry says that he did all these things as revenge for Spider-Man not helping to find a cure. But Norman just says that he was wrong. Both of them were. And then we flash back to the MCU Oscorp. Harry deactivates the machine and says that what he did was worth it, and that he's okay with going back to Rikers. We fast forward to the next day where Tom Peter arrives at Oscorp to see off his counterparts, but when he gets there are decorations everywhere. Toby Peter comes in with a bunch of pizzas and says, "Pizza time!" Okay, maybe that's not in the movie, but in an ideal world it is. Andrew Peter says that he thought that since they just, saved the multiverse, it was okay to celebrate a little before they go back. And then we see them off. The movie wraps up with us seeing each Peter going back to their daily lives once more. Then we go over to Los Angeles and Eddie is returning to life as normal. But when he's asleep, he gets whispers in his ears. Whispers of Venom saying, "Kill Spider-Man." Cut to black. I think Venom 3 will probably be Venom vs. Spider-Man, so I think that'll be some pretty good setup for a movie where Eddie is brainwashed by Venom into fighting Spider-Man as revenge for the two versions of him rejecting Venom, and then coming to terms with his relationship with Venom being toxic and choosing to get rid of him. As for the mid-credit scene, Harry is back at Rikers when one night a guard comes up to him in Harry's cell. The guard presses a button on a bracelet he has on and his face changes to Dimitri from Spider-Man Far From Home. He prefers to be called the Chameleon. He threatens to beat out of Harry everything he knows about the alternate realities. We cut to Dimitri in an abandoned parking lot talking to a mysterious figure. He says that Harry told him about a team in another dimension called the Sinister Six that was designed to kill Spider-Man, and a secret tactic to do so. The figure turns around. It's Quentin Beck. Excellent. Parker will pay for what he did. Cut to black. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, check out my other videos. I have done a couple other videos giving my pitches for superhero movies, so check those out, and remember to subscribe for daily uploads. Bye.